Samantha adjusted her apron for the third time that evening, brushing invisible lint from the faded fabric as she glanced at the clock. Only 20 minutes left until closing. The diner hummed with the usual late-night rhythm, soft jazz from the jukebox, the hiss of the coffee machine, and the quiet clink of forks against ceramic. To the world, she was just another waitress. To herself, she was a ghost of who she used to be. She moved through the aisles with quiet grace, refilling mugs and wiping down tables, her thoughts miles away. Bills were piling up. Rent was due. And despite her pride, she'd agreed to something she never thought she would. A blind date, arranged by a friend, just for the free meal. It wasn't her style, but hunger had a way of redefining dignity. At that moment, her phone buzzed in her apron pocket. A message flashed from Claire. He confirmed, "Fancy place, 7 p.m. tomorrow, don't back out." Samantha sighed. "One night," she whispered under her breath, "just dinner." She didn't know his name, didn't know his face, only that he was wealthy and probably looking for someone to impress. She told herself it didn't matter. She wouldn't see him again after tomorrow. She just had to survive a night of forced laughter and overpriced food. But what she didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that he had already heard her voice before, and that it had haunted him every night since. Miles Lancaster was used to attention. At only 39, he had built a billion-dollar tech empire from nothing but code and caffeine. His name echoed in conference halls and boardrooms. Magazines called him the silent architect, and investors clung to his every word. But behind the prestige and curated image, Miles was a man running from silence, because in the silence he could still hear her voice. It had been nearly a year. Just a voice on the other end of a late-night call, anonymous, comforting, unforgettable. He had stumbled across a helpline after a particularly brutal week, when even his luxury penthouse had felt like a prison. He never gave his name, neither did she. But for those 15 minutes, her warmth had reached a part of him that no one else had in years. He tried calling again the next night. She wasn't there, nor the next week. Eventually he gave up. But her voice stayed with him, soothing, steady, real. In a world where everyone wanted something from him, she had asked for nothing. That's what made her unforgettable. Tonight, Miles sat in a high-rise suite above the city skyline, scrolling through a curated list of potential dates his assistant had gathered from a private matchmaker. Nothing caught his eye, until one profile, barely filled out, caught his attention. No photo, just a first name, Samantha. He didn't know why he stopped. Maybe it was the simplicity, maybe the mystery, or maybe a gut feeling. He tapped the confirmation button. Tomorrow he'd meet her. And with no idea who she was or what voice she carried, he had no clue that fate had just set its plan in motion. Samantha stood in front of the cracked mirror in Claire's apartment, tugging awkwardly at the navy blue dress. It wasn't hers. It didn't fit quite right. Too tight in the waist, too loose in the shoulders, but it was the nicest thing she could find on such short notice. Her own closet was a graveyard of uniforms and faded t-shirts. Tonight wasn't about elegance. It was about survival. One good meal, maybe a little leftover bread to wrap up for tomorrow. Claire hovered nearby, applying a final touch of lip gloss to Samantha's lips. "There," she said with a grin. "You look like someone who belongs in a place with cloth napkins." Samantha chuckled softly. She didn't belong in that world, not anymore. But there was something strangely freeing about pretending. For just one night, she could step out of her role, the waitress, the struggling woman with too many responsibilities, and into a story that wasn't hers. As she left the apartment, the city felt different, brighter, colder. The ride on the subway was a blur of faces and empty stares. She clutched her coat tightly, the dress hidden beneath layers of anonymity. When she emerged near the restaurant, her breath caught in her throat. It was stunning. Floor-to-ceiling windows, warm lighting, valet parking. It looked like something from a movie, a place where laughter clinked against wine glasses and everyone knew which fork to use. Samantha hesitated at the entrance. What if he could tell she didn't belong? What if he saw through it all, her borrowed dress, her shaking hands, her empty bank account? But she stepped forward anyway, not knowing that the man inside had once been saved by the same voice she used to soothe strangers on stormy nights. Miles had arrived early. He always did. It wasn't about punctuality. It was about control. The kind of control that let him choose the table, the lighting, the view. Tonight, he picked the table by the window where city lights danced in the glass and made everything feel slightly unreal. He wore the kind of suit that whispered wealth instead of shouting it, tailored, understated. His hair was perfectly in place, but his thoughts weren't. For some reason, he was nervous, something that hadn't happened on a date in years. Most of his meetings with women were transactional, polite, and forgettable. But tonight felt different. He didn't know why. The hostess approached him with a soft smile. "Mr. Lancaster, your guest should be arriving shortly." He nodded, eyes still fixed on the door. Then he saw her. She stepped in slowly, like someone bracing for a cold wind. Her coat was modest, her dress simple, but there was an undeniable grace in her movements. She looked unsure, as if she was waiting for someone to tell her she was in the wrong place. And then she spoke. Just one line to the hostess. A quiet, polite phrase, and Miles froze. It was her, the voice, the very one that had comforted him on that sleepless night months ago. That voice had wrapped around his fractured thoughts like a bomb, and he had never forgotten it. His heart pounded. He watched her walk toward him, completely unaware of the impact she had already made on his life. She smiled nervously, clutching her purse with both hands. He stood, and for the first time in a long while, Miles Lancaster didn't know what to say. Samantha sat across from him, trying her best to look composed. The napkin on her lap trembled slightly, but her smile stayed in place. She didn't recognize him, not really. He looked vaguely familiar, the kind of face that might have been on a magazine cover or in a viral video once. But she didn't follow the news, and rich men weren't part of her world. Miles, por outro lado, mal conseguia ouvir o garçom. As palavras se misturavam com o som de sua própria respiração acelerada. Era ela. Sem dúvida, aquela voz, baixa, gentil, com uma cadência que parecia feita para acalmar tempestades internas, não poderia ser confundida. Ele não precisava de uma confirmação. Seu corpo já sabia. Seu peito apertava como se estivesse diante de um milagre que não ousava tocar. "Are you okay?" Ela perguntou de repente, inclinando-se levemente. Ele piscou, recobrando o foco. "Yeah, sorry. Long day." Ela sorriu aliviada. "Tell me about it." E ali estavam, dois mundos opostos, fingindo que eram apenas dois estranhos compartilhando um jantar. O garçom trouxe o vinho, e Samantha tentou não parecer impressionada com os talheres de prata ou o cardápio sem preços. Ela escolheu a opção mais barata com o nome mais fácil de pronunciar, disfarçando o nervosismo. Miles, ainda em silêncio, lutava internamente. Deveria dizer algo? Perguntar se ela lembrava? Contar que a conhecia de um lugar onde segredos eram deixados no escuro? Mas ela não fazia ideia. E talvez, por enquanto, isso fosse o melhor. Porque uma parte dele não queria quebrar a magia daquele reencontro silencioso. Não ainda. Samantha began to relax as the meal progressed. The food was exquisite, delicate flavors she couldn't name, textures she'd never tasted before. She ate slowly, savoring every bite, careful not to appear greedy or out of place. The wine, rich and smooth, warmed her chest and softened the tension in her shoulders. For a moment, she forgot why she had come. Across the table, Miles observed her with quiet fascination. She wasn't like the women he usually met. There was no performance in her laughter, no attempt to impress. Her eyes sparkled with genuine curiosity as she asked him questions, not about his money or status, but about simple things. Do you like the city at night? What's your comfort food? Do you ever walk just to think? He answered in half-truths, vague responses carefully measured. He didn't want to lie, but he wasn't ready to reveal who he was. Not yet. Tonight he wanted to be a man, not a mogul. And with her, he could be. Samantha, for her part, noticed the restraint. He was polite, articulate, charming, but guarded, like someone with walls built high and thick. She didn't mind. She had walls too. And maybe that's why it felt unexpectedly easy to sit with him, like two actors pretending not to recognize each other's masks. As dessert arrived, a tiny, elegant plate of something she couldn't pronounce, she caught herself smiling for real. This wasn't just a free meal anymore. There was something beneath the surface, something unspoken passing between them. And though she didn't know it yet, that something had been waiting for this exact night to come alive again. What neither of them realized was that the truth was already beginning to leak through the cracks of their carefully constructed disguises. The restaurant had emptied slowly around them, but neither noticed. Their conversation had drifted from light banter to deeper waters, memories, regrets, favorite books, the kind of dreams they never dared say aloud. The air between them had shifted, grown softer, more intimate, but still, Miles hadn't said anything about the voice. He was waiting. For what? He wasn't sure. Maybe for confirmation, maybe for courage. Samantha leaned back slightly, swirling the last of her wine. "This was really nice," she said, almost surprised. "I didn't expect that." He smiled gently. "Neither did I." There was a pause, just long enough for something unseen to stir in the air. And then, without thinking, she laughed. Not a small laugh, not polite, a full, sudden burst of joy that slipped past her defenses. It was over something silly he said about eating cereal at midnight. But that laugh, it was the laugh. Miles' heart skipped. It wasn't just the voice, it was the same cadence, the same unguarded warmth he'd heard on the other end of that phone call so long ago. It hit him like a chord being struck in a familiar song, a sound buried in memory, now unmistakably alive. His smile faltered. Samantha noticed the shift in his eyes. "You okay?" she asked again, her tone playful but curious. He nodded slowly, then cleared his throat. "Have we met before? I mean, your voice. It sounds familiar." She blinked, caught off guard. "I don't think so," she said with a nervous chuckle, "unless you've been to Eddie's diner at 2 a.m. for a terrible cup of coffee." He didn't laugh, because suddenly he knew exactly where he'd heard her. And now the question wasn't whether to tell her. It was when and how much to reveal. Miles sat quietly, watching her. Her smile faded slightly as she noticed the change in his demeanor. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, uncertain. Had she said something wrong? Was it a mistake to come? The fear crept in again, the kind that told her she didn't belong in places like this, across from men like him. But Miles wasn't pulling away. He was sinking deeper, into a memory. That night, months ago, he'd been standing on the balcony of his penthouse, phone in hand, staring into the city abyss. The world had applauded his latest acquisition, but inside, he'd felt hollow. He had called the number on a flyer he found crumpled in a coffee shop, an anonymous helpline, scribbled in ink. No names, just voices. And then, her. Samantha. Her words had been simple, grounded, nothing poetic, and that's what made them matter. "You're not broken," she had said. "You're just tired, there's a difference." He had clung to that sentence like a lifeline. Now, here she was, in front of him, unaware of the part she had played in pulling him back from the edge. Samantha tilted her head slightly. "Are you sure we haven't met?" she asked again, but this time with real curiosity. Miles hesitated. "No," he said softly. "Not in person." She raised an eyebrow. He could feel the moment balancing, truth or silence. His secret teetered on the edge of a confession, but his instinct told him, not yet. This night still belonged to the magic of not knowing, to the tension of discovery. So instead he asked, "Would you like to take a walk? There's a view of the city just around the corner." And just like that, the night opened a new door. They stepped out into the crisp night, the city alive with a low hum, honking taxis, muffled laughter from a rooftop bar, the glow of neon bleeding onto the sidewalk. Samantha pulled her coat tighter around her borrowed dress, grateful for the change in air, though her heart was still tangled in questions she couldn't form. Miles walked beside her, hands in his pockets, gaze on the skyline. It was strange, being this close to someone who had once been a voice in the dark, someone who, unknowingly, had held a piece of him no one else ever had. He still hadn't told her, not yet, but every step made the silence harder to keep. They reached the Overlook, a quiet platform with a railing and a view that stretched endlessly. The city blinked below them like 1,000 possibilities. Samantha leaned against the railing and exhaled slowly. "This is beautiful," she said. "Feels like breathing space." He nodded. "I come here when I need to remember how small I am." She looked at him then, not the man in the tailored suit, but the one behind the quiet. There was something heavy in his eyes, a loneliness she recognized. Because it mirrored her own. "I used to call this number," she said suddenly, her voice soft, distant. "A hotline, not for emergencies, just for when it got too loud in my head. I only worked there part-time, volunteering, but I liked being a voice in someone's silence." Miles turned to her, stunned. She kept speaking, unaware of the storm she'd just stirred. "People never knew my name. They'd talk for 15 minutes and disappear forever. But sometimes I wonder if I ever actually helped." He swallowed hard. "You did," he whispered. She blinked. "What?" Samantha's eyes narrowed slightly. "What did you say?" Miles hesitated, the words caught in his throat. There it was, the moment when silence could no longer protect them, when the lines between coincidence and destiny blurred into something undeniable. He looked out over the skyline one last time, then turned to face her fully. "I said, you did help someone," he said quietly. "One night, months ago." Her brows furrowed. "You called?" He nodded, slow and deliberate. "It was late. I had just lost something. Or maybe I realized I'd never had it to begin with. I called because I didn't know what else to do, and someone answered. You. You didn't ask for my name. You didn't give yours, but your voice." He paused, eyes locked on hers. "It stayed with me." Samantha stared at him, frozen. The city behind them blurred as her world tilted. "I don't remember every call," she whispered. "But I do remember one. A man who didn't say much at first, who said he couldn't breathe in his own home." Miles nodded. "That was me." A silence stretched between them, thick, real, heavy with meaning. And then her shoulders sank. "Why didn't you say something earlier?" "I wasn't sure," he admitted. "At first I thought I imagined it. Then I didn't want to ruin the moment. Tonight felt like a second chance at something we never even got to begin." Samantha looked away, her mind racing. It was too much, too strange, too poetic to be real, but it was real. And as she looked back at him, her heart beating louder than the traffic below, she realized something. This wasn't a coincidence. This was recognition. They stood in silence, the city shimmering below them like a sea of tiny stars. Samantha crossed her arms, not from the cold, but to keep herself together. Her heart, once guarded behind layers of routine and necessity, now beat uncomfortably loud in her chest. She didn't know how to feel, grateful, shocked, exposed. "You really remembered my voice?" she asked, quieter now, like the question might vanish if spoken too loud. "I couldn't forget it," Miles replied. "It pulled me out of something dark. You didn't know me, but you saw me more clearly than most people ever have." Samantha's lips parted, but no words came. No one had ever said that to her before, not with such honesty, and certainly not someone like him, a billionaire. A man from a world where people didn't just see someone like her. He took a slow step closer, not touching her, just close enough that she could feel his presence. "That call changed something in me," he said. "I didn't realize how much until tonight." She laughed, just a breath. "And I thought I was here for free food." They both smiled, the weight between them softening. Miles searched her face. "What if this isn't the first time we met, but just the first time we could really see each other?" Samantha's eyes welled slightly.